Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you're calling in from. Welcome to Part 3 of the ANA Application Development Series. This particular webinar is on application integration. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the ANA Eastern website as well as the ANA website in about 2 weeks. We ask that you all call into the toll-free number so that you'll be able to easily ask your questions at the end of the webinar. The call-in information is on your control panel under the Audio tab. A copy of the PowerPoint was sent to anyone who registered before 2 p.m. today. If you didn't get a copy of the email, please let us know and we'll send it out after the webinar is concluded. During the course of this webinar, if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat box that is viewable on your control panel. We will also have a question and answer period at the conclusion of the webinar. My name is Rondell Clay. I'm the Regional Director for the ANA Eastern Training and Technical Assistance Center. I have been an ANA TNTA provider for 13 years. I'm a member of the Sistan Wapatinoyate. My co-presenter is Candy Carmi. Candy, take it away.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Candy Carmi, and I'm the Technical Assistance Specialist in the Eastern Region, and I've been with the Center for the past 7 years. I'm a member of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. This webinar is being presented by the Eastern Region Training and Technical Assistance Center, which is a resource of the Administration for Native Americans. We wanted to provide you a little bit of information on the Administration for Native Americans, as not all of you may be familiar with the agency. ANA is a program located within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services under the Administration for Children and Families. ANA serves all Native Americans, including federally recognized tribes, American Indian and Alaska Native populations, Native Hawaiian organizations, and Native populations throughout the Pacific Basin. ANA promotes self-sufficiency for Native Americans by providing discretionary grant funding for community-based projects and training and technical assistance to eligible tribes and Native organizations in 3 program areas: social and economic development strategies, which is also known as SEDS, Native languages, and environmental regulatory enhancement. Funding opportunity announcements for the 3 program areas are currently available on ANA's website at the link shown on your screen. Applications are due June 6th.
ANA holds weekly webinars on a variety of topics, including ACF initiatives, program success stories, and application development. Webinars are held every Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. You can go to the URL listed on the slide to get a listing of the upcoming and recorded webinars. As I mentioned earlier, this is an application development series. Part 1 on planning and preparation was held back in April. The recording of that webinar is available both on the ANA and the Eastern website, anaeastern.org website. Part 2 was also held in April, the 6 elements of a good grant, and it is available on the ANA website as well as the ANA Pacific Basin website. Part 4 will take place May 23rd, and it's regarding submitting the application. There have been a lot of changes to the submitting of an application, so it's a good idea if you take advantage of that webinar. Topics that we're going to cover today. What is project integration? 6 key elements of an application. Ensuring project integration in your application. And then we're going to have a question and answer period. So let's get started. Candy?
Some of us like to use checklists to complete tasks. While writing your application, you might go along something like this. Problem statement, check. Project goal, got that. Objectives, I've got 3. Sustainability plan, check, and so on. During application review, it was pretty evident who was simply including components of an application without tying them together. Reviewers were seeing project goals that didn't align with the problem, a lack of community involvement in the project design, objectives that didn't have a thing to do with the project goal, and budgets that included items that were never mentioned anywhere in the project strategy, and that's just to name a few examples. While yes, you're technically including these elements, you need to connect them and define their relationship one to the other. So for our purposes, the definition of project integration is the effective relationship of application components to form a cohesive, carefully planned project. There needs to be an interconnectedness between the elements of your application so that they seamlessly tell the story of your project. A lack of project integration often demonstrates holes in your project planning that could potentially impact your project's implementation. In the previous webinar, we discussed the 6 key elements of an application. If your application was a jigsaw puzzle, how well do the various puzzle pieces fit together to tell your story?
Since the funding opportunity announcements have come out, we've been receiving questions about project integration. Just to be clear, there should not be a separate section or heading in your application called project integration. Consistency is the key to good integration. Project integration is a characteristic of your entire application, which panel reviewers are going to score anywhere from 0 to 10 points. Those points are really important to getting your application funded. This is a competitive process, and the more points, the better. In part 2 of our webinar series, we went over 6 key elements of an application and their importance. We want to provide you with a brief recap here. Your community, a brief description of your overall community with more emphasis on the targeted beneficiaries. The problem, one problem identified through community-based planning and input. Expected outcomes, what you expect to achieve as a result of the project. Your strategy, a description of how to implement the project. When combined with the OWP, it should be detailed enough to provide a clear picture of how to execute the project. Your capacity is a description of your administrative and financial structures to show that you have the experience to manage grants and to implement the project you're proposing. Required resources are the resources, including funding, required to complete the project, both internal to your organization and externally. If you look at the funding opportunity announcement, you're not going to see the 6 key elements mentioned anywhere. So how do these 6 key elements fit into your application, and how do you ensure project integration? Let's go over the project description to see how it works.
In the first part of your application narrative, you identify your objectives and need for assistance. You want to include some general information on your community to provide reviewers some context on your community. Panel reviewers come from the Pacific Basin, Alaska, as well as the lower 48. So you might have a reviewer who is totally unfamiliar with your community who's reading your application. So provide them some information on yourself. What are the long-range goals of your community? The problem and the project goal that you identify need to tie to a long-range community goal. You provide a brief overview of your community, but you really want to focus a description on the portion of your community that will actually be served by the project. Is it elders, Head Start children, high school age students, or possibly the entire community? Make it clear to the reader. You want to provide relevant demographic data. We've seen applications with pages and pages of statistics. Focus your statistics on those that relate to your targeted beneficiaries and the problem you'll be addressing. If your project focuses on health, include health statistics for your community. If you're writing a language application, include statistics relating to language use and fluency levels. You also want to talk about your organization and how you're involved with the community and those targeted beneficiaries. We've seen plenty of applications where we're wondering, why is this organization undertaking this project? Also in objectives and need for assistance, you're going to identify one problem in measurable terms that the project will address. You also need to describe how the community identified that problem and how the problem stands between your community and achieving one of your community's long-range goals. We Need a Youth Center is not a problem statement because it describes a possible product of a project and gives us no information about how that product is going to help your community reach a long-range goal. A strong problem statement explains why you need that youth center by documenting what current negative condition will be resolved once that youth center is in operation. A better problem statement would be, there are no structured after-school or weekend programs for youth in our community, which has resulted in an 18% increase in juvenile crime since our after-school program was terminated in 2010. A language problem statement that we've seen quite frequently is, we need to revitalize our language. A stronger problem statement is, based on our 2012 language survey, we have only 5 fluent speakers in our community who are all in their mid-80s. In this example, I would include a sample of my language survey in the attachments, as well as a table of the survey results in the narrative.
Your objectives explain how you will accomplish the goal. Reviewers will assess your objectives to determine if the action plan will result in fixing the problem statement you've identified. As you'll see in the OWP instructions, you can have a maximum of 3 objectives. You need to provide SMART objectives, which are specific. What action will be done to accomplish the objective? Will you train, create, teach, increase something? Measurable. You need to include measurable outcomes that will make measurable differences in the community. Achievable. The objectives need to be realistic and something that can be accomplished within the project period using resources you've identified. Relevant and results-oriented. The objectives should address your project goal and your community's long-term goal. It also needs to focus on the outcomes of the project. And finally, time-bound. What time frame are you looking at to accomplish the objective? Here's an example of a SMART objective. During the 36-month project, our community will train 90 unemployed community members in the areas of slot machine maintenance, casino security, surveillance, and food preparation, with a minimum of 60 achieving certification in one of the 4 identified areas and being employed by the tribe's 2 active casinos. It's pretty clear what they intend to accomplish and the time frame in which it will occur. Measurable outcomes are described: training 90 people and 60 or more certified and employed. The clearer, more concise, and more specific your objectives are, the easier it'll be to implement your project. It also makes it easier for the reviewers to understand your project approach. Remember to thoroughly describe your problem and why it's important to your community, as the narrative you include should justify your project strategy and the budget you are proposing. Including letters of support from community members and, more importantly, project beneficiaries help demonstrate the community connection. When it comes from project beneficiaries, it also establishes that they endorse the project. We've seen projects that have had difficulty with getting project participants because the beneficiaries weren't included in the planning process. Getting project buy-in up front is essential. Remember, your problem statement is the negative condition you are addressing. The problem statement should relate to a community long-range goal. Your objectives should help to resolve the problem you are addressing. This is one part of project integration.
So you've identified your objectives and one problem. Now you need to indicate what will be the result of accomplishing this project. In Outcomes Expected part of your application, you're going to provide a project goal that aligns with the community long-range goals and resolves the identified problem, as well as results and benefits that relate to the accomplishment of the objectives. You're also going to include one impact indicator that identifies change in the problem. Coming up with an effective impact indicator can be a challenge. With language applications, it's not as much of a problem. You only have two options. If you're teaching the language, your impact indicator needs to measure the change in language fluency for project participants. For all other language projects, you need to measure the increase in community interest as a result of the project. Remember, when you create your impact indicator, that you need to choose an indicator that can be measured. You need to include baseline data on the indicator prior to grant implementation, or where you are at now. You also need to provide an end-of-project target number, or what you expect to have achieved at the end of the project. And lastly, because ANA works to fund projects that have continued impact in their communities, you need to provide a target number for 3 years after the project has concluded. Now, no one is going to chase you down to see if you've achieved that target, but we just want you to think about what long-term change will be created by this project. The impact indicator identifies, again, that long-term change is created by the project and also is a gauge of project sustainability. Some examples of impacts are reduced number of adolescent pregnancies, lower unemployment rates in your community, and increased percentage of foster children placed in Native American homes.
The project approach is where all of the 6 key elements come together. The project approach tells the reviewer how you intend to implement the project. When used in conjunction with your OWP, it should provide enough detail for a reader to be able to see exactly how your project will be implemented. The project approach tells how you are going to solve the problem identified by the community and how you intend to achieve the project goal. Be clear and concise and discuss your implementation plan in narrative format from the beginning of the project through its conclusion. In the project approach, you need to include a description of how the community assists in the project planning and how community members will also play a significant role in the overall implementation of the project. Make sure the objectives stated in the Objectives and Need for Assistance section of the proposal, the project approach, and the OWP are all identical. Remember, consistency is the key. Don't just cut and paste the activities listed in your OWP into the project strategy narrative and call it good. Your project strategy is a companion to the OWP and allows the reviewers to better understand the project design and to see the project will be implemented. Community participation and awareness. Describe how you plan to keep the community engaged and informed about the project. You should have involved the community in your project development, so they should be kept up on your project's progress throughout its implementation. Contingency planning. When you write your application, you're assuming how your project will progress. But what if something goes wrong? And believe me, something usually goes wrong. You need to identify an action plan to reduce negative impacts on the project in the event challenges come up. A good challenge to address would be diff staff, or what to do if a key staff member was to leave in the middle of the project. A bad example of a contingency would be that you'd form a committee to address project contingencies once you're funded. Reviewers want to see that you thoroughly thought out your project, so spend some time coming up with your contingency plan. Partnerships and leveraged resources. How will partners contribute to the implementation and sustainability of your project? What are their roles? Leveraged resources are any resources but exclude the federal share, the non-federal share, program income acquired, or used during the course of the project period to support the project. What are yours? They could be a free room to conduct classes. They could be someone's time to provide instruction. There are a number of different things that could be leveraged resources. On to organizational capacity. Who is going to work on this project? Do you have the financial and administrative systems to implement and manage your grants? If you've had previous grants, include a list of funding agencies to show reviewers that your organization has managed grants and has the experience to continue to do so. Include a staffing plan that describes the qualifications for individuals that are going to work on the project. And the final piece, the sustainability plan. Describe your plans to ensure that the impacts of the project will continue after the project period has ended. If you're creating projects, how will they be preserved for future generations? Take some time in developing your sustainability plan. It should be more comprehensive than merely stating that you intend on applying for more grants.
Wow, that was a lot of information that Rondell just went over on what to include in the project approach. But it's all important because we've seen a lot of applications where the project strategy or project approach section is only 2 to 3 pages long. You've left a lot out if it's that brief. So be sure to include all of this information when you're writing your application. An objective work plan is ANA's form for applicants to describe how, through what activities, when, within what time frame, and by whom the project is going to be implemented. The OWP should serve as a blueprint for project implementation. Items included in an OWP are project title, project goal, the problem, the results expected, and criteria for evaluating success in achieving them, the benefits expected and criteria for evaluating success in achieving them, the project objectives, and the activities, including positions responsible for performing the activities. Note that this year in your OWP, you're going to use the calendar format for dates. In other words, month, date, and year. The OWP instructions indicate that you can have a maximum of 3 objectives per project period. Therefore, if you're writing for a 3-year grant, you will be allowed a maximum of 3 objectives for the entire project period. An OWP is needed for each year of each objective. Some objectives can span more than 1 year. As a reminder, remember that consistency is key throughout the project. We've seen plenty of applications where the objectives mentioned in the OWP were totally different than the objectives in the narrative. Same thing with the goal and the problem statement. Make sure to use the exact wording for the objectives, project goal, and problem throughout your application. Consistency, consistency, consistency. When you create your budget, include the cost for all activities described in your OWPs and project strategy. The budget and the OWPs are the 2 parts of your application that should most closely align. It's not uncommon during panel review of applications for reviewers to find costs in the budgets that are not discussed either in the narrative or in the OWPs. If you include the cost for attending a conference in your budget, the project strategy should discuss how attending that conference is important to your project implementation, and there should also be an activity to attend that conference on your OWP. The budget shouldn't be the first place that we see something mentioned. Conversely, you want to make sure that you budget for everything that you discussed in your narrative. For example, are you mailing out a survey to the members of your community? Did you remember to include the cost of postage? It's always a good idea to have someone else review your budget for calculation errors and omissions. But actually, it's a good tip to have someone else read your entire application to make sure that it makes sense. Oftentimes, we think what we've written looks great, but another reader might be left with a bunch of questions. You can have someone you know read over your application, or you can have one of the regional technical assistance providers review your application. We'd welcome taking a look at it. There's information on how to contact us at the end of this webinar.
So in review, project integration is not one section of an application. It is the overall cohesiveness of the application elements to demonstrate a well-planned project. The community is your catalyst for determining your long-range goals. Prioritizing those goals and selecting the project that is most critical to be solved with A&A funds. The problem is why you are writing the grant. The outcomes expected are your results and benefits expected, which relate only to the objectives and OWP and measure what is produced and achieved. The impact indicator relates to your overall project and measures the change in your community. The strategy is both what you are going to do and how you are going to do it to overcome the problem statement and address the community's long-range goal. What you are going to do is your project goal and is the foundation for your project. Everything you do after identifying the project goal and the problem statement is designed for one thing, to achieve the goal and overcome or alleviate the problem. You discuss your capacity to demonstrate that your organization and staff have the capability and the know-how to successfully implement the project. The OWP is a blueprint for your project or the action plan with step-by-step specific activities listed under each to assist you in achieving your goal. Finally, the budget is the dollar cost to achieve all activities to successfully complete your objectives. Inconsistency between sections of the application could indicate potential problems during project implementation.
The problem statement should be the result of community input. Your project goals should align with community long-range goals and work towards resolving the problem you've identified. Completion of project objectives should result in achieving the outcomes expected and the project goal. And lastly, budget expenditures should relate to the objectives and activities identified in your OWP and project strategy. All of these bullets are examples of project integration, which is critical to a successful project. Your application should not only contain all the elements, but you also need to make sure that you show the relationship of each element to the next. Project integration ensures that the reviewer can see how each piece fits together to make a strong, compelling application that fully tells the story of your project to reviewers.
In closing, don't forget applications are due June 6th, just around the corner, so you have a lot of work to do. There are a number of resources available to help you with your application. Visit ANA's website to access training manuals, funding opportunity announcements, and other resources. Technical assistance providers can answer questions and also work with you on your application. To locate your region and provider, go to the ANA website. Okay, now we're going to open up to questions and answers. I see we have several questions coming in. For those of you who have logged on the phone, if you have questions, you can just raise your hands. Candy, here's the first question for you. Can you provide an example of a community problem tied to a long-range goal?
Well, with the language example that I cited, if you had a community long-range goal that all community members spoke the language in their home, and the language was used in the government too, that might be a community long-range goal that ties to a goal of revitalizing your language in your community or increasing the number of fluent speakers in your community.
Thanks, Candy. Next question we have. Is there a website to sign up to be a grant reviewer? Want to cover that one?
Why, yes, there is. You can go to ANA's website. Matter of fact, ANA is still looking for reviewers. If you go to ANA's website at www.achs.gov/programs/ANA, I believe that on the home page in the carousel area that you can click in there and be linked to a page that provides you information on how to register to be a reviewer.
Okay, our next question, which I'll give you a break, Candy, for once. While there is a 150-page total limit, not including forms, is there no longer a specific 20-page restriction on the 3 main sections included in the project description narrative? And the answer is you're totally correct. There is no longer a 20-page restriction on your project description. Next question. Can you have more than one impact indicator? Only one is required, but yes, you can have more than one impact indicator. I'll turn it back to you, Candy. Would it be worthwhile to apply if we have already received funding for 2 projects in a row?
Probably not unless you have a lot of spare time on your hands. If you read the funding opportunity announcements this year, it states that 2 consecutive funded grants under one CFDA number, you're not going to be funded for that 3rd application. So, like I said, unless you have someone who's chomping at the bit just to write a grant and you just want to get it scored, I would not submit a 3rd one.
Next question. Is a Gantt chart no longer required? Can one still be included in the additional attachments?
I can take that one.
Okay.
I like a Gantt chart. It's not a requirement, but it really is a nice visual to show time frames of how activities are going to occur. And it also lets a reviewer see if there's periods within your project that you have either too much going on or too little going on. But it is not a requirement for your application. But again, it is a nice component and a nice visual for reviewers.
Okay. You mentioned that every expenditure in the budget should be reflected in the narrative and the OWP. How much detail, though, are we talking about? For example, if a construction element is a part of your project, you don't need to discuss plumbing supplies in your narrative, do you? Will construction materials suffice in the narrative section? I think we first need to mention that A&A doesn't fund construction. Do you need to mention every little supply that you are going to purchase for your project? You should name the main ones, and they can go into your budget justification. In your project narrative, you're probably going to be talking about activities that are going to require those supplies, and reviewers will recognize that. Next question. In eligible project statements, the support of ongoing social service delivery program for the expansion or continuation of existing social service program, does this apply to expanding existing language programs in school systems? For example, putting elder support in language classrooms? No, it doesn't. We're talking strictly about social services or family services. It isn't dealing with language programs. Do you have anything to add to that, Candy?
No, that's good, Rondell.
Next question. Will a list of committee planning meetings with dates suffice as supplemental documentation of that aspect of community planning? Should we provide one set of meeting minutes as a sample? Candy, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I would want, as a reviewer, I would want to see more information. I'd want to see numbers. I'd want to see how, what went on during that meeting. I think I would want to see meeting minutes. And if the meeting was covering a number of different topics, say it was a council meeting of some kind, and you were going over a lot of business, you could just excerpt the portion of the meeting minutes that pertained directly to the project. But I would want to see those meeting minutes, and I would want to, or at least have a synopsis of what went on during that meeting, as well as number of people who attended and the dates.
Thanks, Candy. What about indirect costs? Should you mention this in the project strategy? It's not necessary to mention indirect cost specifically as you're talking about your organizational, administrative, and financial capacity. You are indirectly talking about indirect cost. So that should suffice. Another one for you, Candy. A&A will not fund project activities that they have previously funded under a CFDA number. We used to have an ERE grant, but are finding that SEDS fits the next step better. However, there is an activity that needs to be long-term, repetitive, and is connected to both sorts of grants. Can this activity be funded under SEDS if it was previously funded under ERE?
That would be a good one to send directly to your TA provider for them to look at the context of that original application and what you're proposing. ANA does not fund anything that is duplicative that you did before, but if it's being conducted differently this time, or it applies to what you're currently doing, I would have to look at that application directly. So if you could either send us your email address and we can forward it to your TA provider, or one of us can take a look at that and give you a better answer on that after the webinar.
Okay, next one. ANA wouldn't fund the construction of a traditional style building, i.e. a traditional Hawaiian halipili. Okay, sorry for my pronunciation. Meeting house made in traditional style. ANA has funded traditional rock wall construction. It depends on how you phrase your project. ANA didn't actually fund the construction of those rock walls. ANA funded the creation of curriculum to preserve the practice of the rock wall construction. So two different
And also, Rondell, just to add, ANA considers construction to be more of a building or something that's habitable. And the rock wall also wouldn't really fall under that, nor would a fence, for example. If you had a buffalo farm and you needed to put a fence around the buffalo farm.
Thanks, Candy. Applying for grant after 2 grants in a row, isn't it correct to say that scoring well will make a difference? Candy?
Are they saying that they've had 2 consecutive?
If they've had 2 consecutive grants in a row.
Well, if you've had 2 consecutive grants under the same CFDA number, you are not going to be funded for the 3rd unless there's a few that funded within the scoring range in your area or under that program area. So it's probably not a good idea to submit if it's under the same CFDA. Remember, you can that requirement it pertains to the CFDA numbers. You can apply if you had a SEDS and you wanted to apply for a language this go round. That's perfectly allowable.
Thanks, Candy. Our project is a community kitchen on the 2nd floor of our building. We are planning to include an elevator in addition to the retrofit of office spaces. Does ANA pay for these 2, retrofitting and elevator? Keep in mind that ANA does allow minor renovations to a building, to an existing building. However, it's 25% of your total project cost or $150,000, whichever one is less, whichever amount is less. So there is a restriction on the amount of money that you can spend on minor renovations. Quick question, is the SEEDS FOA out? No, the SEEDS FOA is not out. It will be coming out shortly. I wish I could give you a better idea of when it's coming out. We know it's coming out, and hopefully within the next month, but you can't hold me to that. Next, I have tried using the OWP form on the grants.gov application and have not been able to add a row except at the end of rows. Is there a way to insert a row? Will this be addressed with grants.gov? Well, we will certainly bring it to ANA's attention, but to my knowledge, there is no way to insert a row between 2 previously completed rows. when you add a row for a new activity, it automatically goes down to the bottom. And there's nothing you can do about it. So I strongly suggest, in fact, I know I have one gal that I'm working with who went ahead and outlined her OWP in hard copy format and then used it to cut and paste into the FOA form so that she got things in the correct order. That's a suggestion on how to deal with that.
Yeah, that's a good tip.
The internet access on our island is not consistent. Sometimes it works and sometimes it does not. Can we ask for a waiver but submit the application online if our internet happens to be working when we are ready? As long as you get, submit and request for the waiver 2 weeks in advance, you can go ahead and submit a hard copy, and you can submit the, try to submit online. You just need to make sure that you indicate in both applications so that A&A doesn't have you down there duplicate as a duplicate. So put a cover letter with your application that you tried to submit this online so that they know that you're coming in both ways. And finally, and Candy, I will let you, oops, never mind. I was going to say, and I finally got down to the last question, but I just lied. I did not get down to the last question. A couple more just came in. But I'll let you take this next one. Does A&A offer cooperative agreement types of funding for a project? You know the answer to that one?
Why don't you take that one?
The answer is no. No, they don't usually. It's a competitive funding process. They don't use cooperative, or I don't know that they have ever used a cooperative agreement type of funding for a project. Next question. I understand we can only ask for $2,500 for travel, even if it would cost more to travel for the training after award. Is this correct? I'm assuming that you're talking about post-award training, and the FOA stipulated regional amounts for traveling to post-award training. And you need to use the amounts stipulated in the FOA when you're doing your budget. I hope that answers your question. What will the CFDA number be for seeds? Seeds will have the same CFDA number as SEDS, 93.612. So you can't submit for both. You have to choose one or the other. How does one describe a subaward situation in the narrative and budget? I have seen a project where they were contracting with or entering into a subaward agreement with other organizations under the project. You need to have separate budgets for each of those subawards as well as the overall budget for the project. And you need to clearly justify what's in the budget, and you can talk about it as a subaward in your narrative. Hope that helps, Anna. If not, contact your TA provider, and I'm sure they can give you more information. Let's see. Oh my goodness gracious, everybody's gone crazy on us. If I ask for other funding while I don't know that the A&A has been awarded, can I ask for reprogramming of the awarded amount or include the additional funds, say from EDA or USDA, as my match? As far as including as your match, That is going to depend on which FOA you're applying under, because there are different matching requirements for the different programs that ANA has. It's possible that those extra funds, those additional funds from a different grant program could be used as leveraged resource for your project. Okay. Candy, I'll give you this one. I've been talking too much. I thought you could apply for both SEDS and SEEDS, but you could only receive or accept an award from one. Is that not correct?
Yeah, you could apply for both, but you will receive funding if they are both within the fundable range, and you receive high scores on both. ANA will come to you, and you'll have to make a decision as to which one you want. You cannot have them both simultaneously.
Thanks, Candy. Okay, next one. Would it be contrary to the Insular Affairs Act to require a project to have matching if the amount is greater than $200,000 if applying through ANA funding? That one's above me, Melvin. I'm going to have to look into that for you, and then you know who might be able to help you in a faster manner would be the Pacific Region TNTA Center. They've got some really good folks over there that understand the matching requirements for the Pacific Basin. And I don't know enough about the Insular Affairs Act to answer your question. I'm sorry. And thank you, Commissioner, for helping me with the one question on the cooperative agreement, and I believe that was Melvin as well. The Commissioner has informed me that ANA has used cooperative agreements as they currently have a cooperative agreements with the Native American Family and Fatherhood Association. However, they only do cooperative agreements in very rare circumstances and if directly related to a specific ACF or HHS or White House initiative. So it's not a usual practice. So thank you for clarifying that. In a 3-year project, do grantees need to attend both the post-award training and grantee meeting in year 1? Yes.
If they're having, if the grantee meeting is occurring, yes, you would be attending that. You'll be attending the grantee meeting. It's usually an annual event, so you'll be attending it for probably all 3 years. The post-award, you only attend once. So you're only going to put the budget, the money for travel for the post-award into your budget just the one time.
Okie doke. Next, the NOFA is allowing a waiver of match for insular areas, governments specifically, up to $199,999. I am assuming, sorry, I just got another question and it moved on me while I was reading. I'm assuming that if we need $240,000 of match, we might have to come up with the $40,000. Candy, could you research that one looking at the FOA while I go on to the next one?
Sure, but that's a lot of match.
Yeah, I can't imagine that you would have that much match at 20% of the total project cost. So I'm not, Joey, I'm not understanding your question, I'm afraid. Well, you look it up on the waiver on the, I'm assuming this is a Pacific Island project. So, Candy, if you could look that up while I move on. If the grantee meeting should be attended each year, we plan on a 2-year proposal. Should we include travel funds for a grantee meeting for 2 people for both years? Yes. If a consultant agrees in writing to work at less than their documented usual and customary rate, can that amount be considered as match, or is it a leveraged resource? No, it can be used as match. It would be an in-kind, as long as you have it documented and agreed to in writing. Candy, did you get the answer on the matching?
Yes. According to the FOA, matching requirements, including in-kind contributions of less than $200,000, are waived under grants made to the governments of American Samoa, Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. This waiver applies whether the matching required under the grant equals or exceeds $200,000.
Julia, does that answer your question?
And again, they could talk to Keone or the Pacific staff just to confirm that too.
So she's following up and says, so we have to come up with $40,000. And that's the way it sounds based on what you read. Correct, Candace?
No, it sounds to me like no, she does not. Matching requirements of less than $200,000 are waived.
But
so it sounds to me like if your matching requirement was over $200,000, then you'd have to come up with it.
With the $240,000.
Or yeah, whatever it is. But because our grants, you're not the matching is under that. But that's how I'm reading it.
Okay. Well, if we haven't thoroughly confused you, Julia, I still strongly suggest you get a hold of Keone or Napua or Dennis at the Pacific Basin T&TA Center, and they can certainly help clarify much better than we did. Okie dokie. We are at an end. All our questions have been answered, hopefully sufficiently so that everybody can move forward with their applications. We appreciate everybody's attendance and participation. Please remember that grants are due on the 6th of June. And we strongly encourage you to take part in the final webinar in this series, Submitting Your Application. There have been some changes to the way you submit your application. So I think you'll find that webinar on May 23rd very, very helpful. So be sure to sign up for it. And as we said earlier, this recording will be up on the website for anybody to re-listen to within the next couple of weeks. Please take time to complete the short survey that you'll be sent upon conclusion of this webinar. We value your opinion and want to provide information that is useful to you. This concludes our webinar. And we thank you very, very much for joining us today. Have a great day.